All right, so I'm here to give one of the initial city talks. My name is Sean Bacon. I'm from the graphic design department. I'm going to talk a little bit today about boosting enrollment. I'm also going to get into a little bit of enrollment management and just some tips on how can you really help fill your classes. This is something that I learned a lot from my time here. I'll talk a little about my story. But when I came here, it's kind of funny that I'm giving this talk because I would always ask, who can help me with enrollment management? And there are a lot of people on this campus that can help you with different facets of enrollment management, but you know, it really falls on you as a faculty member to kind of put those pieces together and figure out how they all connect. So the first thing I want to start with is that I feel there's a perception of our program, graphic design, that we have great enrollment. We're this stellar, growing program, which we really are, but I think it's important to start with that wasn't always the case. We weren't always in the same situation we were at. We had some really serious enrollment issues that we had to solve. We were canceling classes, we were struggling filling our classes, and it took an investigation for us to really figure out why is that happening, how can we fix this, and what are the different components that will play into that. So for us, it really comes down to that we were really this person. You know, I felt like this person every single winter break and summer break. I was agonizing over looking at the schedule, watching those numbers tick back and forth. It was taking a lot of effort for us to fill classes, make sure that we were hitting the magic number that it would run. And that got really frustrating. It got old. And I really was wanting to not only reclaim a little bit of my vacation back, I also really wanted to find a way where we could schedule in a sustainable way where these things would fill on their own and maybe make us able to focus on other aspects of our program that are really important. We didn't really have a strategy. That was really the first thing I realized. We had no strategy of how we were scheduling and how we were approaching enrollment. The numbers just didn't really add up. And we were a little bit lucky in that we had somewhat of an obvious problem that we needed to solve. But the first thing I'll say is that I like data. I know that's not everybody's attitude on this campus, but I really enjoy looking at the data. This is my program review. You can see a little bit of my markup, how much I look at this. I'm not saying that the data has to define every decision you make, but for us, we never make decisions without at least referencing the data. I want to know where we're at. For me, this is really the lifeline of the program, and this really drives a lot of the decision making that I make. And one thing I'll say too is that a lot of you maybe feel like you don't like the data, you don't like what it says, and that's maybe why globally you don't like data at all. But the only thing I like about data is we can also change these numbers. We have the power to do that by making adjustments that we're doing in our areas to move, go to fewer classes to increase enrollment, or potentially look at switching a teacher, or things of that nature that might potentially change what these numbers say. So I also like to tell people that you have a lot more control in some ways of how these numbers are presented or what they will look like in the future than you think. And so if you don't like your data, maybe that's where you should start, is really looking at how can you shift and change things that will make the data say what you want. But for us, when I looked at the data, the biggest problem was that we needed to add beginning classes. We really had one section of all of our beginning courses that were feeding multiple intermediate and advanced sections. And the math just didn't add up. It made no sense. But for me, it was kind of a scary realization because it was counterintuitive to me that I was going to add classes to increase enrollment. It makes sense, but at the time it was a little bit of a nerve-wracking experience. Like, is it really going to work out? I had to have faith a little bit that these numbers made sense. So I looked at the fill rates of our beginning classes. I also tried to identify when they filled by. And one thing that was really supportive of my thinking was that most of our beginning classes filled before the open enrollment date. So I knew that there was an audience of people who never even had a chance to enroll in this class. I also started looking at how many people were crashing, how many people were interested in taking these classes that weren't able to get them. And that data really supported doing this. So we had to start making some tough decisions. We really needed to look at how do we add more beginning courses. And that meant we may have to cut and move courses that we had offered historically. And that was tough at first for us. We went to potentially, only offering classes once a year, as opposed to every semester to free up some FTF that would allow us to do these kinds of things. But we knew there were two other aspects we needed to focus on too, and that was communicating our legacy and success stories. We have a long legacy here at City College. This program's been around for 30 plus years. There's some incredible alumni stories, success stories that come out of our program. And we knew about them, but our community didn't. So we need to figure out how can we better communicate those things? How can we let the external San Diego community know what a successful program we are and the kind of outcomes that come of taking graphic design at City? And the other one was fixing pain points. That was hard for us, but we really had to honestly reflect on what we were doing and looking at places of things that weren't working. So that was really the third facet. How can we fix our pain points and help us move forward? So we knew that we would have a lot of tough decisions like I talked about, things like potentially canceling classes, running things once a year, but it was worth it if I didn't have to be this person anymore. I was incentivized by wanting to have our enrollment become a more sustainable situation, and I knew it would be tough at first, but once we got past that phase, that I felt confident it would be a much more positive experience for myself, my students, and my faculty. So when we started working on beginning classes, we really, again, looked at canceling courses, taking intermediate courses, turning them into beginning courses, so that we could have more sections that would feed our upper division courses. And I think for me, one thing that helped here is really understanding how the campus works. You know, this is a complicated place to work. There's a lot of moving parts. You know, I sometimes compare it to this kind of machine. We're all these cogs and wheels that help move everything forward. And I find that a lot of times faculty feel that they don't know what to do or where to go. And a lot of that comes from sometimes a lack of understanding of how our campus works. So one thing I suggest is really understanding how these things fit together, how funding comes down, how decisions are made on the campus, because I think it'll empower you to not only make better decision making and maybe advocate better for what you want, but also potentially even exploit parts of the system, right? By understanding that, I think that can sometimes help you to be able to get what you want. I spent 6 short months on academic senate, and for me it was eye-opening. I learned more about how this campus operates, how it works, in those 6 months than probably any other time. Most bodies come into those meetings, you see how things connect. It's a great place to ask questions about the many acronyms of our campus or how things fit together. So that was a really valuable experience. But I think being aware of the machine and how it operates is kind of the first step of the battle, because it'll allow you to empower yourself to maybe advocate a little bit better for what you want to do. I also think it's important to be this person. You really need to talk about what you want. And don't be afraid to repeat yourself. That was something I learned, is that all of us are busy people. We all have a lot going on. That's from president down to the bottom. And you may ask for something once or twice, but maybe you don't get the outcome you want. Don't be afraid to continue to advocate for what you're looking for. You know, I'm that guy where it's like the 100th time Sean's saying he needs beginning classes, and maybe it's that 107th one where it finally clicks and the things are there that I need to make that happen. And so I think being an advocate is really important. And I also think being able to repeat yourself and get information to the people that you need it to. And that really goes back to this machine idea. If you know the people involved, the people that you need to get this information to, it'll make you even more effective. So be able to defend what you need as well. I think that's where data comes in a little bit for me. I like to have a little bit of data that supports what I'm saying. I feel that our administration supports that kind of thinking. They want to see some, backup, some homework you've done of why this is a good idea and why this is important and what the potential outcomes are going to be. I think always focusing on a student success angle is a good way to go with that. But I think that defense is important. Why do you need what you need, and why is it so important? And then again, not being afraid to repeat yourself, to tell multiple people. I think there's nothing wrong with doing that, because I think it takes a little bit of repetition, right? It's like the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? Sometimes you need to be able to do that. I also have a little bit of reputation of being someone on this campus that will show up and knock on a door. I find that I've never had a negative experience from doing this on this campus, and it's been really effective for me. Some of us just get too many emails. It's just really hard to get through and sift through all of the emails. And maybe you should go and knock on a door, say hello, have a conversation. There's also people on this campus I've learned through doing this that this is really their preferred way of managing or working with their staff members. And so once I realized that that's a good synergy between me and a superior of a way that we can work together, it makes me even more comfortable to do this. And I think it can be important if you're not getting at somebody, if you're having a hard time, where are they? Go find them. Maybe try to talk to their secretary, create a meeting. I think we all want to help each other, but you need to advocate that you need that help, and sometimes just going and knocking on the door is the best way to do that. So like I said, we canceled classes. We trimmed where we could so that we could add in beginning classes we needed. And we had to have faith that this would work and that we could add later on, because these were courses we needed. These were important classes, but if I'm looking globally at this problem, funneling in more students to keep our enrollment in those courses is really more important than maybe offering a greater variety or diversity of classes. So, that was where our prioritization fell, and that's really what led us to do this. Because I think a lot of us feel that FTE or load or courses are kind of, for me, the most precious thing on this campus. They're the thing that I never get enough of. I always want more, right? I want to add classes. I think we all do, but it's really hard to get the resources to be able to do that. So it was scary for me. It was, will I be able to eventually add back and grow the program in the way that I need to? But I had to have faith, again, because I really wanted to create a sustainable program that would enroll itself. So the second problem we dealt with, or the second angle that we attacked with our enrollment strategy, was communicating our legacy and success stories. How do we do that? What's the most effective way for us to communicate to our audiences, to let people know we're here, to let people know the quality of our program? And it goes back to me being this guy again. A lot of that was just being on a soapbox and being willing to talk to anybody I possibly could about this program. It's almost a joke. Like, people know me. If I'm in a restaurant with a waiter or a waitress, I'm in a Lyft, I'm at Trader Joe's. If I have any opportunity to engage somebody about what I do and what this program is all about, I'm gonna take that opportunity. I've had students, no joke, Lyft drivers that I've had that end up enrolling in my courses, clerks at Trader Joe's, all kinds of things like that. And it's just through these happenstance sort of interactions that occur in my daily life. But you want to be able to talk about your program effectively and be able to have a little bit of a sales pitch. The other wonderful thing about this factor is I do this enough that I even have aunts and uncles who will talk to people about this now too, and other people in my life who know that this is such a priority that they're willing to kind of carry that legacy on. Our students as well, they become kind of walking billboards for us, talking about how much this program changed their life and the outcomes that came of it. So one thing I'd say is have an elevator pitch. Have a short and sweet, maybe 2 to 3 sentence statement that you can tell somebody that sums up your program. What are you all about? I use words like high achieving, high success. I talk about our transfer opportunities. I talk about the awards my students win, right? Those are buzzwords that usually help me connect, but you really want to have an elevator pitch and have a way that you can quickly and concisely describe your program to someone else. A good way to think about this is the only statement. All of you should be able to answer this statement somehow. We are the only blank that blank. So you should be able to have a differentiating factor, something that makes your program different than all of the other ones. And if you're sitting there thinking, well, I don't have that, well, maybe we need to work on building that. What could set this program apart? Or is there a certain demographic you can serve, or a certain audience you serve, or potentially a certain kind of student, or a certain career path that you can tap into that will allow you to create this statement? Because one thing that's important to think about when we're talking about only statements and differentiating factors is if you don't believe your program rocks and is the best thing ever, no one else is ever going to believe it. You have to believe this, you have to be able to sell it, you have to be able to talk about what makes your program so unique, or else no one else is going to care about it. So it's a little bit of soul searching potentially for some of you who have a hard time answering these questions. But sometimes it can be building new curriculum, building new pathways, trying out things that become your differentiating factor. But having an elevator pitch, having a way to differentiate yourself is really important to your success. Also, where do your students live? What kind of students do you have? Is there a certain population of students that you get frequently? This was a challenging thing that we dealt with. Where do my students come from? Well, through a lot of anecdotal research, talking to students, looking at our industry and the interests of them, I realized that my students mostly hang out in Golden Hills, South Park, North Park. They're hipster kids. They like coffee shops, restaurants, bars. That is a lot of where my student body is living and hanging out and spending time. So those are areas that we really go after. Those are places that we really go and try to recruit students. So when I do postcard campaigns and I'm sending postcards out or putting them in coffee shops, those are neighborhoods I'm hitting first, because I know a lot of our students come from those areas. It may not be that every single one of my students comes from those areas, but that's where I'm seeing the greatest percentage. So you may think about that. Maybe there's a certain high school, a certain feeder institution that you're getting a lot of students from. Is there a certain demographic that's interested in the kind of work you're doing? Do you have an articulation agreement that's drawing people in who want to go to another institution, right? But like, where do your students live? What environment are they in? And how can you tap into and find those places to recruit your students? So it's important to know who your audience is, how you connect with them. That is not only about where they are, but also what do they want to know about? What do they want to see? Remember, for us, we're dealing with a lot of younger students mostly, people between the ages, I'd say 19 to 30. So a lot of them want to see images, they want to see outcomes, they want to see examples of design work, and that's really what connects them to our program and makes them interested in what we're doing. I also think it's important to build community. I think it's something we forget. A lot of people, when they go to college, it's not just about a pursuit of academic knowledge. They're looking for a little bit of a social experience. They're looking to build community. They want to have that kind of experience that they maybe see in, movies and television shows, right? I mean, there's a perception of what college is to a young person that we need to deliver on a little bit. And I think this is a place where we're a little bit behind the 8 ball. We have a hard time doing this as a community college. We don't have dorm life. We don't have fraternities and sororities. And not that I'm saying we should have any of those things, but what are ways that you could build community within your own area? How can you make students feel included? How can you make them feel like they're a part of some kind of group on this campus that will not only keep them here, but make them more engaged in the kind of work they're doing? Sometimes it's simple things. Our hallway has posters done by alumni. We put them up, they're all framed. It completely changes the way our space looks. It has a little bit of a design firm kind of feel with these black framed, graphic prints. And it really creates an environment that I think our students really want to be in. The other great thing about this is it's also a way for us to share success stories. All these posters were done by our alum. Next to each one is a little plaque or a little piece of paper that talks about who this person is, when they were here, what they did after they left here, and what kind of outcomes came in their life that were created by the graphic design program at City College. And I find that this has been a great thing for us. Our students want to be here. They want to spend time here. I'm constantly kicking people out of classes saying, hey, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here kind of thing. Because they want to be here. They want to be around each other. They want to use the resources and the different materials that we provide to students. Another way to do this is to maybe look at awards. This has been a really successful thing for us. We participate in a regional portfolio review, which is all of the institutions in the region that have graphic design programs, both four-year public and private institutions and community colleges. And we've really pushed for our students to enroll in this competition, because it allows our students not only to get exposure to the community, which gets them jobs, it gets them opportunities, but it also exposes us to the community and lets them know what high quality our program is, which means they want our students, they want to serve on our advisory board, they want to be associated with our program because they know it's one of the best in the region. It also, for us as a community college and a little bit of an underdog, becomes a great way for us to showcase that we maybe do have students that have better skill sets than some of these other institutions. Because there's really a comparison happening by an outside community that's making these kinds of judgments. But maybe there's poetry competitions or writing competitions or essay competitions that your students can enter. If there isn't anything like this, maybe you want to work with a professional organization to create something like this. But potentially there might be a way for you to use awards and accolades to kind of maybe sweeten the pot for your students, to make them realize that it's a really high quality program and that they're going to get outcomes like that too. Because I think we're always fighting a community college stigma. And the more you can fight that and show excellence in your program and rigor, the better. I think also working on pipelines and pathways is another thing that we worked with. There's a lot of ways to go about this, but do you want to form articulation agreements with high schools, with other colleges? Do you want to maybe create pathways where students can come to your program from other places? We invested a lot of energy into an articulation agreement with San Diego Unified. That's been really valuable for us, not only from getting students, but also working with faculty getting, again, more free publicity in a way from these faculty members who really support us and support our program. So they're going to tell their students how great we are. And that's just, again, another person who's advocating for us. But I've done other things that didn't work. I spent some time serving on Poway Unified's advisory board for their career technical program. And that was something I was proud to do. I enjoyed doing it. But through that experience, I realized that this isn't really in our service area. These aren't the kind of students that would join my program. And so I still help them out, but I've dialed that back a little bit because I realized that's not really where I'm getting the outcomes and the numbers that I need. So you might try a lot of things here, but it's good to look at pathways and how can you create articulation agreements and incentivize coming here. We're working right now with continuing ed to figure out if we can create a pathway from their IMCP program to our program to help those students increase their skills and maybe get better and more elevated jobs or transfer opportunities than they can in the program that's developed over there right now. So I also want to say this because these were a lot of things we tried. It was not a silver bullet. It was not one thing that really helped us do this. It was a series of things that we tried. Some of them worked, some of them didn't, that really culminated in us overcoming our enrollment issues. So forming articulation agreements, working with high schools, looking at continuing ed. Can you serve some kind of industry need? Does the industry need training in something in particular that's in your area that you could maybe write curriculum and fill that void? Could you sponsor an event? We sometimes sponsor events, conferences and things where we get exposure to our community. Also networking. I think any kind of networking event within your area is a smart thing to do. Letting people know you're out there, going out and talking to people about what you're doing here at City College is really valuable. Because I really believe that we are our best advocates for our program. This campus is amazing. Outreach is awesome. Everything that's happening in terms of promoting the college is wonderful, and I think the work that is happening is really important and really awesome. But I also feel that sometimes you might get lost in the shuffle. And we found for us that sometimes taking on a little bit of promotion and the advocation ourselves is really the best way to go. Because I know my program better than anybody. If I can get somebody on a tour here through my program, I have almost 100% success rate of getting them to enroll. Because I can talk to them about what we do. I can show them portfolios. I can tell stories about my alumni. And that's really hard for someone in outreach to do. And it's not that they don't want to do it. It's that it's hard to remember all of that and be able to advocate for all of these programs in a really individual way. So I say lean on them. Participate in the events that they do. But maybe also go another way where you advocate for yourself as well. So the last thing that we tackled was really discovering and fixing pain points. And this was the hardest part of the process by a long shot. Because this involved a lot of reflection. This involved a lot of really honesty. Us being really honest about what was happening and maybe where the problems were. And those weren't always things that we liked to see or hear. But acknowledging those negative aspects was a really important part of us fixing these problems. So one of the first ones was our program language and course sequencing was really confusing to students. They did not understand how to get through our program and what the outcomes would be. Part of that was the titles of our courses, the course numbers. It was just sort of a mess. And I had a dream of going into curriculum and being able to sequence all of our courses and realize that that wasn't going to be as easy as I thought. So we tackled this really through counseling. So we do presentations with counseling, helping them understand our program, talking about outcomes, what we do, equipping them to better advise our students, right? But also we took some of that on. I do a lot of counseling of my students. I work with students. I bring them in and tell them, let me help you figure out, what are you going to take in spring? What are you going to take next fall? What's the right sequence? What courses would I take? What are your goals? What do you want to have come out of this? And I found through that process a lot of success. And students also felt like we were building more community. So they felt connected to me as a program director and somebody who could help them figure out things about graphic design. We also had courses that had chronic issues. Courses that just never filled. And I'll use an example of our professional practices class. This is a class that goes over all of the business side of design. It's a really important class. I actually think it's probably the most important class we offer, but it never fills. Not once. So I have to really look at it and say, okay, the last 5 semesters, this course has not filled. I can't run it again. I cannot run this course again until I figure out what's wrong with it, right? What isn't working about that course? Is it maybe the content? Is it the delivery? Is it the time? Right? Those are factors I'm going to look at to try to figure it out, because you don't want to just, throw darts at a wall. You want to be strategic here. And by me pulling this course off the schedule, it really allowed me to try to figure out what's going on, and maybe we can add it back when we're more confident that it will fill. This also led me feeling a little bit like a man with an umbrella with a bunch of holes in it. The first 3 years I was here as a full-time faculty member, I taught almost every single class in our area. And that is not because I wanted to or I thought I know best, but I felt as the lead faculty member, I needed to get into these classes and see what was happening, because that really helped me identify what wasn't working and how could I adjust things. Our advanced type class is a great example of this. It's a course that had chronic enrollment issues. We were lucky to get 18 people in there. It's a required course for our major, which is crazy. It made no sense why this was happening. So I took the class over, and I realized that there were some adjustments I needed to make to the delivery. I needed to maybe make it a little bit more about typography. And that really changed this entire course. And now fills. I had 36 last semester. I have 32 this semester. It fills every single semester completely to zero without question. And it just took some tweaking of listening to students, adjusting delivery methods and content so that they felt more engaged with what was happening. So thankfully I'm at a place where I'm not going to teach any more new preps, but through teaching all those preps, I was able to really dig in and find out what's going on. And that was, again, that reflection, looking at what's happening, being honest with ourselves about what isn't and isn't working. Because again, sometimes it's the time, sometimes it's the instructor, sometimes it's the course content or delivery. And that's really where the data came in again. It's something else that was really important, is I really allowed the data to help me decide these things. As I was looking at what courses weren't filling and why, I started looking at, well, when was the last time it did fill? Who taught it then? What time was it offered? Can I find trends here? Can the data help me have at least a direction to go in terms of how I can maybe solve this problem? And the good thing is, this is me now. I'm no longer that sad person behind a computer screen. Our courses fill. They fill quickly. I have no issues with enrollment. We're continuing to grow, which is really important to us and something that's really valuable. And also, I just don't have to agonize over these things anymore. It doesn't mean I don't sometimes have an enrollment issue or a class that's soft. We all will have that. But I'm not having the kind of chronic issues I did before, and I cannot tell you how liberating that is. And that's why I'm really doing this talk and encouraging you to try these strategies out, because I think a lot of people who struggle with enrollment, it's really a crisis. And you kind of feel like your hair's on fire all the time. But if we really go through these steps and really get real about the problem, I think there's a potential for you to be this person too. And for enrollment not to be as scary or as challenging of an issue. So let's just go quickly. We worked on adding more beginning courses, which for us is really smart scheduling. So it's really about scheduling smart. That is a lot of things. That is offering classes when students want them. One thing I realized when I was here is a lot of classes we were offering were based on when the faculty member could teach them. And sure, that is an important thing. I have a lot of working professionals in my program who teach. I want working professionals in my program. But I also got to make sure that I'm scheduling when students actually want the class, right? And that also goes back to me sometimes having classes that I just acknowledge. These are not going to fill every semester. These are going to run once a year because that's really where the demand is. So smart scheduling. We also worked on communicating our legacy and success stories, which is really about marketing your program. It's about telling your story. It's about having that only statement and that elevator pitch. Being able to go into environments and tell people how great you are and why they should come here to City College. I don't think there's a time in education where there's been so much choice. These students have a lot of options. They can take courses online. They can take Skillshare classes. Some of our students in our area probably could pick up a lot of what we teach just by watching YouTube videos. So how are you different? How are you going to differentiate from Art Institute or National University or Cuyamaca or any of these colleges, right? What's going to make you unique, and how are you going to market that program? And then the last thing was discovering and fixing our pain points. And that's really about retention. That's really what that was about, looking at where we're losing students. Because it's one thing to bring in students, but if you're losing them, it's not helping you, right? So we want to also be able to evaluate and say, okay, where are we losing students along the way? And how can we patch that umbrella, right? And make sure that we don't lose those people and have them where we need them and have them stick around to go through the entire program and ultimately complete. So all the things I would say is, this is an amazing campus. When people ask me why I teach at City College or why I love City College, there's a lot of reasons, but one of the biggest ones is the people. The people here are incredible. I am just floored constantly at the colleagues I work with, how talented they are, how interesting their backgrounds are, how much expertise they have in a variety of areas. So I would say lean on those people. Ask for help, build relationships. That's been key for me. You know, Claire knows me in the campus research office because I go in and I'm like, help me with this data. What does this mean? And then I may even say, okay, I get it now, but how do I change that number? What would you do if I want that number to go up and down? And she's a wealth of information, of strategies and ideas and ways that I can splice and look at the data that help me make better decisions, but also help advocate for my program in a better way. Building relationships is huge too. I think my relationships on this campus have been really key to me being able to really get this agenda through. You know, I would say the last class I needed to add was our third section of our beginning typography class. And that really came through a strong workforce grant that came to me through Jeannie Tyler, which was partly because I'd been working on these things and our program was successful and growing, but I also think part of it was that I knew Jeannie. I'd worked with her in equity. We had a relationship. I'm not saying that she chose our program because of that, but I think it helped that I had a relationship with Jeannie so that I could really advocate for what I needed, and I felt comfortable to tell her, look, these are the courses I really need to add, and this is why, and this is how I think it's going to work. So building relationships. Be honest with yourself. It's something I run into a lot on this campus. You know, not intentionally lying, but you're not honest with what's really happening. What do students really want? Maybe the class you're dreaming about and you think is the coolest thing in the world, they're not into. Well, you need to really look at that and be honest that that's the case and allow those kinds of things to drive the decision making you're making. And I think a lot of us sometimes cater too much to what we want as faculty or what we think students want, but you need to be honest and reflect on that in a way that allows you to make better decisions. Define that only statement. Be able to differentiate yourself and talk about what makes you unique. Identify where your audience is. Where do those students live? Do you see a trend? It doesn't have to be 80% of your student body. Maybe it's only 30%. But hey, if you can find where some large group of your students are coming from, and maybe it's multiple places, that's going to really help you be able to market to them and cater to them, right? And the last thing I'd say is look at the data. Like I said, we don't make decisions based on data, but we never make a decision without looking at data. And I think it's important to get comfortable with the data, to be able to look at it, because it will also give you tools and language and statistics that will help you sell what you need and really be able to make the change that you need to be able to create in your program.